Hi, Sanford Smith with Penn State Extension. Again, I'm joined by Julian Avery, a research professor of wildlife conservation in the College of Ag Sciences. Julian, you teach a course called herpetology, and for those that don't know it, it's reptiles and amphibians. And I wanted to ask you a few questions today about reptiles. So, what's a reptile, and how might people encounter reptiles in their everyday existence?
Yeah, great questions. Happy to be here today. Thanks, Sandy. Reptiles in general are animals that have a scaly fingernail-like integument. So when we say integument, we're talking about a covering or layer. Reptiles tend to have a relatively impervious, scaly covering that keeps them from drying out. They lay protected eggs, and they get most of their heat and energy from their surroundings, right? So they don't have the ability to internally control their temperatures like we do. So we call them ectotherms. And kind of a side note is that we oftentimes refer to them as cold-blooded, but that's not necessarily true, because a cold-blooded animal means that its blood is cold, but reptiles will put themselves in the environment in ways that allow themselves to heat up and have a fast metabolism and be able to move quickly, and all that stuff comes from having warm blood and a warm metabolism, and that comes from thermoregulating in their environment.
Yeah, and that comes from the sun, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. Is there any other heat that's provided to them somewhere?
Not really. The ground can get pretty warm after a full day, so it might not be all that uncommon to find them hunting along roads or other things at night where the surfaces are warm. But you really need openings in forests like this for reptiles to come out and bask and get ready for the day.
Now, I'm sure that a lot of people listening, when they hear reptiles, they think snakes.
Yeah.
But there's another whole group of reptiles which aren't generally thought of as reptiles. In fact, some people think these are amphibians, but they have a little shell on the outside.
Turtles, yeah, turtles. So within reptiles, we have lizards, snakes, turtles, amphisbaenids, which are another kind of a legless type of reptile that's a little bit more evolutionarily ancient. But it's funny, snakes actually seem to have come out of the group of lizards. So they're actually sort of nested within lizards. And in lizards that haven't become snakes, you also have other groups of legless lizards. So the ability to go without legs is actually not all that uncommon within reptiles.
And the scale on a turtle, I think it's on its leg, isn't it? I can't remember. Or is that shell a scale?
Yeah, so turtles are cool in that they're the only animal we know of that has its hips enclosed within its rib cage. But that architecture across their back, the shell, is actually kind of an extension off the backbone. And then all the pretty patterns on the surface of that turtle are scales. We call those scutes. So they have scales on the top of their body on the shell, and then they also have them across the legs.
But those scales on the legs are totally different than what's on the back, isn't it?
A little bit, still same kinds of keratin.
Okay.
They're made out of keratin, the same thing in your hair and fingernails. They just grow differently.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, reptiles are coming out in the summer then and warming, or
Yep.
early or later spring, early spring. What do they do through the winter?
A lot of reptiles will do what we call brumation, which is kind of like hibernation, except they're not really going to sleep. So turtles are pretty adept at that. Box turtles that might use a cut like this a power line cut like this will start down under the leaf litter, and as it gets colder and colder, they'll actually start digging themselves down further and further. So some animals go deep, and others sort of adjust their position throughout the winter as it gets colder and colder at greater depths.
Yeah, and are they totally freezing in the winter, or are they kind of staying a little bit?
Some have tolerance. Some are going deep enough to avoid freezing. For the most part, they're going to try and avoid that. But the crazy thing are things that live in creeks, right? So we also have wood turtles in Pennsylvania. And they, not needing heat necessarily, can go to very cold temperatures. And what's interesting is that as their metabolism slows down in very, very cold water, they need very, very little oxygen. And so what's kind of funny, and a lot of kids might find this interesting, is that they'll actually take water in through the cloaca where they get rid of their waste, and they'll extract oxygen from that water within the tissues of their cloaca. So a lot of kids like to call them butt breathers. It's not quite accurate, but that's close enough. But they don't need to come up for air throughout the winter because they can get enough from the water that they take into their body.
That's fascinating. Now, I've asked you this question before in different ways, but what is it you like best about reptiles? Do you have any sort of a favorite characteristics or favorite reptiles?
Oh, yeah. Much like I'm kind of hooked on biodiversity in general. Each group has its own sort of really uniquely evolved traits and behaviors. Reptiles are just so pretty and so fascinating, and I think some of the species that we have in Pennsylvania are gorgeous. One of the most prettiest is actually the northern copperhead. One of our vipers, a very, very sort of calm animal that likes to sit and wait and hunt for its prey. I think they just have the most absolutely gorgeous colors and pattern any animal in the northeastern United States has.
Wow. Okay. Some people would run from your favorite thing there.
Yeah, no need to run. They're more afraid of us than we are of them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Julian,
Yeah.
for teaching us a little bit more about reptiles today. We hope you appreciated it.
Yeah, thanks.